Going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us here for this Week 17 lineup show. We are live on the SportsEthos YouTube channel, and I believe we are live on my Twitter account as well. We haven't done this before, and yet looking over on Twitter, we are live on both platforms for the first time. We've been doing these shows on YouTube. Going to try and do them on Twitter as well going forward, get some more interaction. You guys can throw your chats here, preferably over on YouTube, but also if you're over on Twitter, we'll be checking in over there as well. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe. Like the show over on Twitter as well. More people will see it. And, of course, give us a follow. I'm at Joe Orrico 99. Joined here, as usual, by my co-host, Steve Vidovich. Now, Steve took the reins solo last week. A bit of a scheduling snafu. But we are back here again. Very exciting time in the NBA as the trade deadline is a couple days away. Steve, my friend, how are you doing today? How are you doing with all this news that's coming at us?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's fun to finally get some action in the league, some trades. I know that we had the one small little trade of Rui Hachimura a week or two ago, but it's nice to get like a big name moving to a new place, and we might get some more today even. Another thing on this whole like Twitter and YouTube thing is I feel like the viewers out there could tell who's younger based on who had the ability to use technology better. I think that goes without saying here. But yeah, I don't know if I could have made that happen. So happy to have you make that work.
Until we hit go live, I was very skeptical of my technological capabilities here. I'm a student. A lot of you guys know I'm a student. Trying to send in an assignment yesterday to my teacher, and I had to like send him all these workarounds and stuff to get us. It's a bunch of headaches. But just long story short, I am not the most technologically savvy person, so I am a little surprised that we're working here, but nonetheless, we are up and going. We're going to be talking some weekly lineup decisions, some sit starts. If there's a free agent you guys are thinking about grabbing, somebody you're not sure if you should drop, let us know. Trade questions, anything, baseball, hell, any questions you guys got. Steve also is a football guy here, so it's branded as a basketball show, but we'll take any of your fantasy sports questions here. Steve, you tend to make some lineup notes before we get going. I don't know if you want to start with that, if you want to start talking about some Kyrie Irving stuff. Hell, Jonathan Isaac, we got a ton of topics to get through today. I'll leave the floor to you. Where do you want to kick off the show from?
Yeah, I'll kick it off with the schedule. So for weekly lineup settings, if you guys have any questions in regards to that, I went through the schedule as I normally do. This week is trade deadline week, so it looks like the NBA went with a light schedule for most teams. 20 of the 30 teams, so that's 2/3 of the league, have only 3 games this week. And quite a few of those teams actually have a back-to-back within that 3-game week. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 of the 20 teams that do not have a back-to-back of the 3-game weeks. So definitely want to go ahead and check what teams you guys have on your roster. Teams that don't play until Wednesday or later this week include the Charlotte Hornets, the Indiana Pacers, Miami Heat, Philadelphia 76ers, and the Toronto Raptors. So all 5 of those teams don't have a game either on Monday or Tuesday of this week. We have 9 teams that have 4 games this week. And of those teams, we have 2 teams that have no back-to-backs. So those teams have really ideal schedules playing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. And because of the Super Bowl being Sunday, that's just a 2-gamer. So these 4 teams, not only do they have the most games that are back-to-back this week, but they also play on the lightest scheduled day of the week. And that's going to be the Celtics and the Pistons. So if you have any Celtics or Pistons rostered, they're looking like pretty decent plays. I guess the trade deadline throws a big wrench into all of our plans this week because, speaking of the Pistons, let's say you got a guy like Alec Burks and you're considering starting him in a weekly lineup setting. But then the trade deadline is on Thursday. Maybe Burks gets shipped off to another team, so you're really not getting that full 4-game week. A lot of teams, a lot of players that are going to be on the move, they're going to shrink down from a 4-game week to possibly a 2-game week, or maybe from a 3-game week to possibly a 1-game week. So you definitely want to be aware of the guys that are most likely to be moved. And those are more of your fringe rosterable players anyways. I did a pretty deep dive on the Western Conference and potential candidates to be moved. So, like for instance, a guy I've liked utilizing, Josh Richardson of the Spurs. The Spurs do have a 4-game week this week, but 2 of those games come on Friday and Saturday after the deadline. So I would rather stay away from Josh Richardson if I had an alternative choice, because you might only be getting a 2-game week out of Richardson. He might get moved to another team and then definitely going to play a more limited role wherever he goes. And he probably won't play on Friday or Saturday or Sunday for that new team. So definitely a weird week in terms of scheduling. I think that we're fortunate that the NBA didn't give us a lot of differing schedules. We have a lot of similar schedules with 29 of the 30 teams playing either a 3 or 4-game week. So that's at least nice. But you definitely want to be very mindful of the fringe players who might get moved on deadline Thursday.
It's tricky in any fantasy sport. I remember, writing an article around the baseball trade deadline last year and talking about it on the pod. You kind of have to save at least the majority of your moves until after the deadline is passed. Like, I mean, the way that the schedule breaks down this week, it's more backloaded. You got 11 games on Friday, 9 on Saturday, then 2 on Sunday, and then 11 on the Monday to start next week. So it is kind of backloaded. There is more opportunities to stream earlier in the week. And you might be tempted, like on the Tuesday, even the Thursday, to make an ad where there's 6 and 4 games respectively. But I think it would really benefit your team. Let's say you have 4 ads, maybe use at most 2 beforehand and then save 2 for afterwards, because you never really know what value is going to be opened up. There's many teams. My Toronto Raptors are a big example. They might just trade the entire roster. They might just trade Anunoby, Van Vliet, and Siakam, and I maybe not all of them, but there are certainly going to be some moves in Toronto, and there's going to be value that opens up later in the week and early next week as well, once we're really seeing how rotations are finalized and who's slotting into lineups that weren't even as of today. So I think it definitely makes sense to hold off on the majority of your ads. If you have 4 of them, I would say use 1 or 2 maybe for streaming early in the week and then save the other ones. I mentioned Toronto, and you mentioned this before we started going today. They could potentially be a third team in the Kyrie Irving trade, which would kind of surprise me. When I first saw it yesterday, I thought it was fairly solidified. I'm not sure how that would break down. Based on what you've seen and what you know, how would you expect Toronto to factor into a trade like that?
So I definitely think the Nets are the team hoping to get the Raptors involved, or it could be a mysterious third team. But from Adrian Wojnarowski's tweet earlier today, I think it dropped like an hour or so ago, he mentioned that the Nets would like to get a third team involved, and that regardless, the deal will be finalized within the next couple of hours. So likely ahead of the slate kicking off on Monday. Not that any of the players in that trade will suit up for their teams tonight. Both the Mavs and the Nets play tonight. So they're definitely going to have relatively bare bone rosters, especially Dallas with Luka also being sidelined. But I would say the Nets want to get the Raptors involved because the Raptors obviously have win now players that are likely more attractive than Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith. So perhaps they'd like to, route that first round pick that they got in that deal to Toronto, along with some of the other firsts that they have at their disposal. Maybe Dinwiddie ends up in Toronto. Perhaps I would say that they're probably going after Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam. That would be my guess, is that they want to go after one of those 2 guys. Is Toronto willing to move off of one of those guys in a deal? That remains to be seen, but they are definitely a team to watch over the next couple hours. If we get word that the deal got finalized just between the Mavs and the Nets, which it seems like that should be expected within the next couple hours, which probably means that Sean Marks is busy on the phone with Masai Ujiri of the Raptors, or Bobby Webster. I'm not sure who's the one on the phone there, but I think that they are a really hot team to watch right now. If Fred VanVleet comes back to Brooklyn and Dinwiddie goes to Toronto, you'd have to think that somebody else is coming to Brooklyn as well, along with him, because I wouldn't think it would just be VanVleet by himself. I think that would, negatively perhaps impact Ben Simmons a little bit? What would it do to Van Vliet? I think that it probably stays neutral, perhaps slightly better with the Nets because they have more shooting on the wing. So that maybe would open up a little bit more opportunity for Van Vliet. Maybe his field goal percent goes up a little bit, but maybe some of those counting stats go down a little bit, especially when Durant returns. Siakam fitting in with Brooklyn alongside Ben Simmons. I don't know about that as much. I think I prefer Van Vliet going to the Nets, replacing the point guard that they lost with Kyrie. But it's going to be really interesting. I think that we are going to get some sort of resolution within the next couple hours. And if we don't hear that the Raptors get involved in this potential three-way deal, I do think the Raptors are going to be involved on Thursday in something. Definitely a big team to watch out for. I would say if you're going to like rank your trade deadline most likely teams to make a move, I would go with the Spurs and the Pistons at the top of your like minor teams going to make some moves, try to get off of Nerlens Noel, Josh Richardson, Jakob Poeltl. But the Raptors are among like the buzziest team to watch ahead of the deadline. I also am interested in watching the Wolves, interested in the Jazz. They got quite a few names that could be on the move, but I'm really curious to see what happens. If I was to bet, I would bet that Toronto doesn't get involved in this deal because if it was going to happen, I bet it would have already happened. So my feeling is that they're not going to end up getting involved. It'll be a two-teamer, but it'll be interesting if it does happen.
I think it's kind of overly complicated to add such massive all-star pieces into a trade that already looks fairly solidified on both ends. I don't. First of all, I think it is Masai Ujiri on the phone making the phone calls, even though Bobby Webster is listed as the GM. I think it's probably Ujiri. I'm expecting, let's say Van Vliet does get traded to Brooklyn. I don't think that would, kill his fantasy value by any means. Like he's been a second round player this year. Basketball Monsters rankings, they have him 21st. I don't see that anything in particular would go down that much. Like he's averaging just shy of 20 points a game. I feel like he can maintain that, filling in for the Kyrie kind of role. The assists, which are at, where is this, 6.5? I feel like I'd be more of a lateral move than anything. It scares me, though, as a lifelong Toronto fan, to see these guys being traded away. And I think Van Vliet is pretty likely to be traded away, considering he declined the extension they offered him. I think it was 4 years, 112 million or so. It seemed fairly reasonable, but he thinks he's worth more. Maybe he does get traded. And with the offers for Anunoby right now, I've heard 3 first-round picks is the going rate. I would expect them to make some moves, which will be very sad for me as a Toronto fan, as a Toronto homer. You guys know that here. I tend to really favor the Toronto guys, but I think there will be some guys who will be shipped out of town, even if it's not in that Brooklyn trade. Expect Toronto to be fairly busy here. Guys, make sure you're hitting the thumbs up and the subscription buttons wherever you're watching. If you're on YouTube, then that's great. If you're on Twitter, you can see our handles here. Go follow Steve and myself. We do these shows every Monday, and we're going to continue to do them for the rest of the season. And they should be over on Twitter every single week as well. So if you guys want to listen on that end, throw your questions over there. We'll also keep tabs. But make sure you're subscribing. A lot of great stuff in the works here at Sports Ethos. Throw your questions in the chat. We've got one so far. I guess we'll get to that in just a second here. But Jonathan Isaac is the last piece of news we usually touch on once a week. We talk about our buddy John Isaac. What are your thoughts on him right now? I mean, he's come back. He's been getting fairly limited minutes, but he's not been terrible when he's been out there, like 10, 12 minutes a game, but he's putting up decent counting stats. Are you adding Jonathan Isaac, or are you just, we're still in the same boat as we were last week?
I'm in a very similar boat. I think that he's eclipsed now 11 minutes in a game. I think that was his season high. And you're right. I mean, he is his on-court impact in limited minutes is definitely apparent. I mean, I think he grabbed something like 7 rebounds in 10 or 11 minutes. That's really impressive. There's not that many guys who can get that many rebounds in that limited amount of time. If we do start to see him climb into that 16 to 20 minute range, then I'll start paying attention. Then I will like shift focus from leaving him on watch lists to like perhaps he's worth a speculative ad in head-to-head formats with the hope that he can really be impactful in the playoffs. But I don't think that happens this season. I really don't. I could even see Jonathan Isaac get moved ahead of the deadline, and perhaps Orlando wanted him to get back into action so that they could try to trade him to another team that wants to continue to rehabilitate him ahead of next season. I just think the Magic looks so much different than they did when Isaac was there before. I don't see him getting ramped up to that 16 to 20-minute range until maybe at least after the All-Star break, if not even longer than that. I mean, his ramp up has been the slowest ramp up I've ever seen. And I'm not going to put much stock into it until we see it start to get into like he plays, 8 minutes a half. Once he starts to play 8 minutes a half and he has that kind of impact on the game, then I'll think about a speculative ad. But right now, I don't believe it's going to happen. So I'm still in the camp of I'll believe it when I see it.
We haven't been given much reason to believe over the course of this injury. And I mean, to his credit, he's been out there no more than 11 minutes, which was that yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday where he played 11 minutes. And still, he's putting up decent numbers. Like the per game numbers are like inside the top 200 in 10 minutes. So for my thought process, it's like he's probably a luxury stash at this point still. He's not somebody that you should be grabbing, but you could make the argument, I think, if you are a first place team, you are well ahead of the pack, or even a second place team, you've secured your playoff spot. I don't think it hurts necessarily, also depending on the depth of your league, of course. If you're in a 10-team league, you can't really do it. 12, it's easier. 14, 15 teams, it's a lot easier. And I think that it kind of, I don't know, it's such a polarizing topic because I know, anything could happen and maybe he doesn't play as much as we expect going forward. But I feel like by the time we do get to fantasy playoffs, which are 8 weeks, it's about 6 weeks away, I think, maybe he is getting those 20 some odd minutes, and it's definitely luxury stash. It's not like you need to go and add him right now. This is, if you're at the top of the standings, I think I might take a shot on him in 1 or 2 leagues. And the funny thing is his roster percentage has actually gone down. Like it was up to upper 20s, low 30s before. Now that he's actually playing, and that was before he even played a game. He was at 25% rostered. Now he's at 23% rostered when he's playing and showing a little bit of promise. So I don't think people generally know how to feel about him in terms of like the Magic from a real life point of view. Another team I think might be wise to try and acquire him still. Like I'm not even sure how old Jonathan Isaac is. You lose track at that point after a couple of years. Is he 26 or something like that?
I think he's in that range. There's another guy who's
25.
Ooh, wow. There's another guy that I think might impact Jonathan Isaac. I mean, we got word Chuma Okeke. He is making his way back from a knee procedure, and he just got assigned to Lakeland, the G League affiliate for Orlando. I feel like their skill sets overlap a bit, their positions overlap. So I'm curious to see how the return of the second-year player will impact Isaac as well from a minutes perspective. I have trouble envisioning him getting to that role, but you are right. I mean, the fact that he could be inside of the top 200 in 10 minutes a game is wild.
I'm not in. I'm just, dipping my toe in the water in 1 or 2 leagues. And that's what happens when you play. If you play in like one league, it's probably a little bit too risky to do it. But if you play in like 10, 12 leagues, like a lot of us degenerates do here, I would take like 1 or 2 shares just to be like, okay, maybe something does happen. And that's, of course, if you're at the top of the lineup. You're not doing this if you're trying to come back in the standings or make the playoffs because there's not that much of an immediate impact. But I think by the time we get to fantasy semifinals and finals, he might be somebody getting 22 minutes a game, and that might be enough. Did you hear the Nets are trying to get Van Vliet now? That's one of the comments we got here. Oh man, I'm. It's gonna be a sad day. It's gonna be a sad couple days here in Toronto. I can already tell. But on the Jonathan Isaac front, I think another team might be kind of wise to try and throw an offer at him there, like a real life buy low from the Magic. And maybe the Magic fully know what they have, but if they're trying to trade him, maybe they aren't valuing him as much as they should, because like we said, like he's 25 years old. We've seen the skill set as much as it's been not very present on the court recently. We know what he can do. And I think another team might be wise from a real life perspective to maybe try and acquire him. We'll see what happens. It's gonna be fun these next couple of days up until Thursday. I'm not sure what time exactly on Thursdays, like 3 p.m. or something, 4 p.m. That's generally when they tend to be, like mid afternoon,
3 p.m.
3 p.m. We're gonna see what happens. But last note on that front is hold your ads, keep your ads, because we really don't know what's gonna happen. If he does get traded to another team that's less crowded, then I mean maybe he will be a huge pickup. But we've got a couple of questions here. Let's start getting to them for you guys. Someone dropped Jabari and Mark Williams last night in my league. Who's the better stash? I don't, and appreciate the kind words. I don't know that either of them really is a great stash at this point. I mean, I'll leave it up to you, Steve. I'm more inclined to take Jabari, but neither one really interests me outside of deeper leagues at this point.
I'll disagree with you on that. I
Yeah,
love Mark Williams
yeah,
as a
okay.
stash. First of all, I'll say that I like both of these guys over Jonathan Isaac stash.
Yes, agreed.
Um, but Mark Williams would be the guy. Big rookie. He needs a Mason Plumlee to get out of his way, but he's been able to produce in limited minutes, and I think that those minutes will only increase after the deadline. I mean, the Hornets and big red Clifford. What is it? The big red dog? What do I call
Big
him?
Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Yeah, Clifford the big red dog. They tried to be competitive this season. I don't know why. They had a lot of unfortunate circumstances happen to them, dating back to the summer with Miles Bridges, and then Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball missed a lot of time with ankle sprains. Gordon Hayward's perpetually injured, and Mason Plumlee has looked good, and hopefully they finally find a way to move him so that Mark Williams can get more opportunity. I like Jabari Smith quite a bit. I would love to see him already fix the percentages a bit at this point in time. In points leagues, I would go with Jabari Smith. In category leagues, I'd go Mark Williams.
I think my trepidation comes from the fact that with Smith, he's already been getting minutes. Like it's not like a new thing for him. He's been over 30 minutes recently, but the production just really hasn't been there. And I think it is because the percentages really dragged, specifically the field goal, 38%. I'm just not really that interested this year. Like I've tried to hold him in the leagues where I had him. I don't have him anymore. They were shallower leagues where I did. It was like, I think a couple 10 teamers where I took a chance earlier in the year. And I just, at this point, he's just not that interesting to me. Like I don't know, maybe I'm off of Jabari Smith. Like I think if you're looking at points leagues, the counting stats are nice. You don't have to worry about the percentages, but the percentages are such a killer. And I think what I can be guilty of is I tend to look at everything through a roto / categories standpoint. When there is value in points leagues, there is definitely some value, but I think he's probably closer to being back end. Like even the counting stats, like 11, 3 and 2, 14, 8 and 3. He has some interest. And earlier in the year, I was fully in, and I feel like maybe he just burned me a little bit, and that's why I'm a little more out on him. With Mark Williams, I think it's so trade dependent for me. Like if nobody gets moved, I don't know that he is going to have that value. And I mean, I guess it depends on how comfortable you are expecting a Plumlee trade. Is that something you think we're going to see in the next couple of days for sure? Was that where the thought of adding him comes from for you?
Yeah, I really do think Plumlee gets moved. I think the Hornets embrace a mini rebuild after the All-Star break, and they let the young guys get a lot of run. That's
Okay.
my hope, and I would bet on that happening. I'd bet on Plumlee getting moved.
Okay. If he does get moved, Williams will have a lot of value. I think in my head, I'm a little nervous to add him. But at the end of the day, we're here for discussion. We're here we usually agree, so it's nice when we tend to disagree. Drop the gloves a little bit on the air here. But keep your questions coming, guys. We're going to keep going. We'll go a few more minutes, depending on how many questions you guys get in here. Trade questions, sit start, ads and drops, whatever you guys got, we're going to be here for you. Also check out, we're going on Twitter right now, so check out our Twitter pages. It's covered right now, but go give Steve a follow. He's doing his Deep League stream still. I believe you still do those. Are those every day still, Steve?
5 days a week. I go
5 days a
Monday
week?
through Friday.
Monday through Friday. It's about as much as you can ask for. I mean, I'm doing the podcast Monday through Friday. You need to recharge on the weekend. No one's going to give you too much grief there, but make sure you are following Steve. He is grossly underfollowed still at Steven Vidovich. Check out all the stuff we got going on at Sports Ethos. It's a very exciting time at Sports Ethos with basketball approaching the trade deadline. Baseball's ramping up. New baseball podcast coming out on our channel as well. Hockey in full swing. Football's winding down, but I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on. So check out sportsethos.com. Check out my show if you guys haven't checked it out already. Fantasy MLB Today, Dan's show, Fantasy NBA Today. We got all 4 major sports going. It's a lot of fun, so make sure you guys are checking it all out. Keep leaving your questions. We got nothing at the moment right here, Steve. Is there anything else that you want to touch on for this week in terms of strategy? In terms of, I think we've covered most of it, but maybe in terms of particular players you're interested in adding for this week, more stash, anything else you want to get off your chest here?
Yeah, I did a decent amount of work on this Western Conference, most likely trade candidates. So maybe I'll go into a couple of details of a few names that stand out that I think are most likely to get traded. I touched on one at the beginning of the show, Jakob Pertl of the San Antonio Spurs. I think he is a prime candidate to get moved ahead of the deadline. I know that would free up Zach Collins to have, low end standard league value, maybe looking at like best case scenario of like top 80 and worst case scenario of like, in my opinion, 110. So very safe floor without much upside. Zach Collins right there is an interesting guy to monitor. Another guy I think is going to be moved for sure. I think this is probably the most likely guy to get moved, and the tea leaves, we've seen it from his minutes going down because of rookie emerging. Walker Kessler is the rookie, and the guy that I think is going to get moved is Jared Vanderbilt of the Jazz. Those are the 2 guys I think are very likely to get moved that could shake up the landscape. Pirtle getting moved, I think he would have to go to a contender. Not really sure that would translate well to his fantasy value. Jared Vanderbilt getting moved, on the other hand, I think would definitely increase his value. So he's a guy I would definitely be monitoring. I love what you said at the top end of the show, to save those moves until after the trade deadline gets complete on Thursday. And also it's important to remember that there isn't a lot of fantasy value created at the deadline. I think more fantasy value is corroded at the deadline than is created, with like fringe players like an Alec Burks or Josh Richardson getting moved to free up minutes for youngsters who are inefficient and can't impact standard leagues the way that those vets can. So those are my main overall points this week. I did give out a few dark horse streams, and I can tease them out here on the show. Dark horse streams for today is going to be one of my favorites. He's on 8% of Yahoo rosters, and I think this might be the 7th time I've given him out. And the threshold is 10%. So if he ever got over that 10% mark, which it doesn't seem like he ever will, that's Kenny Kenrich Williams of the Thunder. He's just been so solid, yet unspectacular for the Thunder from a fantasy perspective. And I think he should be on more rosters. I think that he's criminally under rostered. Sure, when the Thunder get some front court help back, he'll go back to being a waiver wire guy. But Kenny Hustle, give him to me again today at 8%. And then the other 2 guys I'm looking at, definitely riskier plays. They're both on the Dallas Mavericks because we're going to see a skeleton crew of guards for the Mavericks tonight. Christian Wood is going to be back, but no Doncic, no Dinwiddie, no Kyrie. So give me Jaden Hardy for a boom bust option. I know we've seen him boom in the past. Definitely leans more towards points leagues because of maybe some inefficiency that we can expect. And then the other guy who's on 0% of rosters, Hardy's on 1%. This guy's on 0% of rosters for deep leaguers out there. McKinley Wright, the 4th. I could see him getting upwards of 20 minutes. He's a 6-foot, very small guard who played most of his time last year in the G League. I actually got to see him in a G League game. Kid can shoot the 3-ball, and he can dish out assists. So if you're looking for assists with modest 3-point production on good efficiency, I think he's got a safer floor than Hardy. Definitely risky plays on both of them because, we don't know who's going to get the minutes. But I'm going to go with McKinley Wright for the floor and Jaden Hardy for that boom bust ceiling.
Probably not any long-term plays in there just while they figure out what's going on with Dallas. I got to be honest with you. I'd never heard of McKinley right the fourth. I'm sure there's one or two viewers out there who can relate. But, in limited minutes the other night, 14 minutes, he had 5, 3, and 5. Definitely somebody you should be taking a look at today. Guys, I think we are going to be wrapping it up. Very exciting time here, and there will be a lot of stuff going on our socials over the next week. So make sure you're following Ethos Fantasy BK. That one is very important. We're trying to get that one up to 10K followers. I know that was a mission of Brewski's. I think we're at like 94, 9,500. We're going to try and get that one up as trade deadline approaches. Very exciting time, like I said. Make sure you're following us over on Twitter at Stephen Vidovich, Stephen with a PH. I'm at Joe Orrico 99. And yeah, you guys might be viewing this on Twitter. If you are, hit the thumbs up or hit the heart button, I suppose, over there. We're going to be doing these simulcasts going forward the rest of the season, try and get some more interaction here from the chat. But appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We will see you again next week. Take care, everybody.